What's up, guys? I am still in my gym clothes. I'm sorry. It's so crazy. It's like there are days where the day just goes by so fast. I don't even know where the day went. How are you guys? How's your Wednesday? While I'm waiting for everyone to join that's going to join, I'll just go over like what I drink while I work out, because you guys always like to know what I do, which is funny to me. Like, I'm not the type of person who's like, this is what I do, but everyone's always like, tell me more. So I like to drink BCAAs, which is pretty common during a workout. The problem is it's so difficult to find BCAAs that do not use aspartame or sucralose as a sweetener. Fake sweeteners like Splenda, or like what you would find in Diet Coke, actually rip tiny holes in your gut lining and mucosal barrier, and they're processed by the liver like chlorine, so they're pretty toxic, and they deplete you of iodine, and that can destroy your thyroid pretty quickly. So that's why people that are overweight drink Diet Coke, and then they're more overweight because they shouldn't be drinking Diet Coke. But anyways, this is just 1 scoop of plain BCAAs, but plain BCAAs taste disgusting. So I use freeze-dried strawberry powder and lemon powder, throw it in here with a little bit of stevia, and it allows me to drink my BCAAs without like being repulsed. Okay, so Emma asked, how do you treat SIBO and Candida? Do I need to test? I have severe brain fog and bloating. Food sensitivity, should I test? I don't think it's always necessary to test, especially if the budget doesn't allow. However, it can be very, very difficult to get really, really complicated gut problems under control without knowing what strains we're dealing with. The reason why I like doing a gut test, if it's possible, is because something like the GI map doesn't just tell you what you're dealing with, it tells you exactly the strains of bacteria you're dealing with. Keep in mind that the gut is a very, very specific ecosystem. Certain bacteria feed other bacteria. Certain bacteria eat other bacteria. It's like a food chain, and certain bacteria are going to make mucus. Well, if you have too much of that good bacteria, you're making too much mucus. So you really can start to dial in, oh, this is why I'm constipated, or this is why I have SIBO symptoms, because I have tons of methane producing bacteria, or this is why I always gain weight because I am very low in Akkermansia, or I have none at all. So you can really start to pinpoint symptoms based on strains of bacteria that you do possess, or pathogenic strains. You can also see your elastase, so you can see your stomach acid, your bile, your enzyme production, so you know where your IgG is, where your immune system is. But again, some people just can't afford to do both testing and supplements, because sometimes gut protocols require $300, $400 worth of supplements for a couple of months. So it really just depends on the person's budget. But I find that sometimes people will do 3 or 4 months worth of supplements, go in blind, and then they're so frustrated because their symptoms aren't going away that they have to actually go and test anyways. So it just really depends on how dedicated you are, how much you want it gone, like what you're willing, if you're just to a point where your gut issues are so complicated, you need to get something to change. Sometimes a test is necessary, but it just really depends. And I know a lot of people that think, they come to me and they're like, I think I have Candida, and they do not have Candida. So many people think they have fungus or parasites, and they have severe bacterial overgrowth. So it just really depends. But when you go through, like for me, a gut protocol is not as simple as just like, take these supplements. I'm making sure that my client is eating the proper diet for themselves, eating easy to digest carbohydrates. I'm making sure that they're taking specific strains of prebiotics, probiotics, they're weeding with herbs. If they need to go to their doctor and get antibiotics, they will. If they need stomach acid, we do that. If they need digestive enzymes, they do that. Protocols are very specific to the person, which is why there is value in working with a practitioner who knows what they're doing. I've seen hundreds of clients that come to me and say like they've spent thousands of dollars on supplements and nothing has really changed, because you kind of have to do it strategically. Sometimes detoxification strategies are necessary, sometimes minerals are necessary, because sometimes you don't have enough minerals and so you can't create enough stomach acid. So it really, like, there is usually a reason why your gut's so messed up in the first place, and just like healing the gut is not enough. You actually have to focus on why your gut got so messed up in the first place, so it never happens again. Because that's another thing, is like a lot of people will heal their SIBO and then 4 months later they have it again because they didn't do what was necessary to keep it gone. Hi, Jess. I got lots of questions. I'll go through your guys' questions that you pre-submitted after I go through the live questions. Hey, how many calories should a woman eat to keep her hormones balanced and maintain a healthy weight? Usually anything above 1,800. Some women need 2,000. Some women need 2,200. It really depends on the amount of activity, what the woman's been eating previously. A lot of women are under eating. They're eating enough for like a toddler, and so their metabolisms are so slow that they need to slowly increase their calories over time. They tend to feel better, feel more grounded, less anxious. They just feel overall like more productive human beings because they're fueled. But it really just depends on the person, how tall you are. Some women are 5'10", some women are 5'1", and so that's going to be a little different. Some women have different paths, so some women are coming from keto and they can't do 30 or 40% of their carbohydrates or their calories coming from carbohydrates. They need to start at 20. So it really just depends. The biggest thing is I would never dip too low. Like personally, I would never try to eat under 1,700 unless I was like trying to destroy my metabolism and destroy thyroid function. Also, I try to hit anywhere from like 100 to 130 grams of protein per day, more if I'm strength training. The reason for that is low protein diets slow your thyroid down and they slow your metabolism down. You of course don't want to eat too much protein in relationship to carbohydrate because protein spikes insulin really high, but you definitely want a good balance of protein and carbohydrate, and fat is kind of relative to the person. So I'm sorry, it can't be more like pinpointed, like you need to eat this much, for healthy weight, because it really depends on you. How much do you weigh? How tall are you? What is your life like? How stressful is your life? What are your symptoms? How are you feeling? What are your hormones like? It really does depend. What's your experience with berberine? Does it truly help insulin resistance? Well, keep in mind that a lot of people say berberine helps with insulin resistance, right? And berberine is antibacterial. We know that insulin resistance very oftentimes comes from the gut, and I've seen blood sugar help, I should say herbs help blood sugar all the time. Things like oregano, berberine, because we know that insulin resistance is driven by gut bacteria and endotoxins. So berberine can help. It doesn't always help. It's not the only thing that helps. Sometimes it needs to be used in conjunction with other things. But in some people it is, very amazing. So it just kind of depends on the person, but I do think berberine is helpful. I use it for SIBO. I use it for just like antibacterial protocols and gut balancing protocols pretty often. I really like berberine, and it helps with insulin sensitivity for sure. I read recently that dandruff points to a deeper issue. Is that true? Yeah, it's a lack of hydration to the scalp. A lot of times it has to do with fungus, and dryness on the scalp is usually like fungal related. So yes, usually people see their dandruff get better once they deal with their fungal issues. Mine costed over $1,000 over 3 months. Die-off is a nightmare, but well worth it. Yes, die-off is really, really hard. We call it herxing or healing reactions. When you kill bacteria or you kill fungus, you're going to feel like things are dying inside of you, because they are. Keep in mind that if you go about a gut healing protocol on your own, and I'm sure if yours costed over $1,000 over 3 months, that's pretty common. You probably implemented a binder, but so many people make the mistake of doing like parasite protocols, antibacterial protocols, gut protocols without using a binder. That is the worst mistake you can make, because you're pretty much killing off things that are holding on to heavy metals, holding on to toxins that have been accumulating for months and years, and they're letting off these heavy metals, and then you're left to detoxify them. And so if you're not taking anything to bind to those, you are going to feel like a wreck. So die-off is already hard. Herxheimer's reaction or herxing is already very difficult as it is, and don't make it worse if you don't take a binder, it's just going to be 10 times worse. So a GI map will show SIBO. It doesn't show SIBO necessarily, because SIBO tests are only usually breath tests. I don't like breath tests necessarily because they can be so inaccurate. They're pretty difficult to execute. But the GI map just started adding a new marker, which is methanobacteria, which is methane-producing bacteria. So a lot of times if your methane-producing bacteria is high, it is an indication that there is methane-producing bacteria, whether that's in the small intestine or large intestine. It's yours to figure out. There are certain bacteria that when they are elevated in a client, I usually assume that there is some type of SIBO, especially if it's combined with SIBO symptoms. Yes, if the client has the finances to run both a breath test and a GI map, I do it. But a lot of times people are just like, I just want to do a GI map, and that's completely understandable. So if there are certain strains like Streptococcus or Staphylococcus and Methanobacteria, I usually say there's SIBO, and we treat it as such. Hi Jess, if I'm looking into going all into the Intergray health field, what is the best way to start and get certified? It just depends on what you want to do. I, of course, didn't know what I wanted to do necessarily. I knew I wanted to help people, but I didn't know who, I didn't know what, I didn't know why. It wasn't like I came in and was like, hormones it is, like women with PCOS. That kind of just found me. That happened organically. So my biggest thing is just to start. Give yourself something that you that will allow you to help people. A lot of people do some type of health coaching certification. I did multiples because I knew I wanted to be a clinical nutritionist, I wanted to be a health coach, and I wanted to be able to use certain lab tests. And so that's why I did the functional diagnostic nutrition program. Yes, that was more money to do multiples instead of one, but I kind of knew that I didn't want to just be a health coach. But that doesn't mean that path is right for everyone. Some people want more, some people want less. So my thing is just kind of do your own research on programs, do your own research on people that you look up to, what programs did they do, and choose one. Just choose one, and then if you want to do another one, you could do another one in the future. But the biggest thing is just start. There are definitely things that I wish I would have done differently, but I did them how I did them, and it worked out fine. So at the end of the day, I just say just pick one. I probably, if I was gonna do it again, I would probably do the NTP program instead of my clinical nutrition program, which was more just mainstream, very plant-based bias. And I didn't really learn very much, but I was able to build upon that, and that's fine. But yeah, I really like the NTA and NTPs. I think they get a really good foundation. What is your favorite experience with pregnenolone taken orally? What are the indications for this? Are there side effects? There can be side effects if you don't lower stress, because pregnenolone is a precursor to stress hormones like cortisol. It's also a precursor to progesterone and DHEA, which is the best, but if you're not taking the steps necessary to manage your stress, it's going to raise cortisol. So you just have to be very careful with that, and I can't emphasize that enough with people, because they just don't understand. They're still not eating enough, they're still over exercising, they still are super stressed out, and then they go and take pregnenolone and they're like, why am I gaining weight? Or why am I super stressed out? And I'm like, because you did not take the steps necessary to manage your stress first. But with pregnenolone, sometimes people have a really hard time getting their progesterone levels up. So I've seen periods come back. I've seen it work really well with my menopausal clients. I don't really try to implement hormones very much, because I think that clients should do that on their own with their own they have to be ready for it. I might send them research on it, but a lot of times they kind of choose if they want to implement them or not. And they'll ask me for advice, if they decide that on their own. But I don't ever say, you should take pregnenolone. It's more I think pregnenolone might benefit you, but I highly recommend looking into the research and seeing if that sounds like something that would maybe benefit you. But yeah, I've seen people sleep better. I've seen people heal their low cortisol. I've seen people get their DHEA levels really good, get their periods back, just general lowering of stress. But it rarely just works like a magic bullet. It needs to be combined with a lot of other things, specifically nutrition and lifestyle. I have diagnosed HA after the pills 6 months ago, and I'm trying to get my period back. I also have the worst cystic acne ever. Sorry, girl. Will the acne get better once I start cycling again? I'm eating a ton more. Yeah, it's one of those things where it does take time. A lot of times they'll say it takes 6 months, but if you don't get your period back, you're not ovulating, and therefore you're not making progesterone. And so detox is not working as well. Estrogen is lingering. Testosterone might be playing a role. And so I know it sucks. Sometimes once you're 6 months post pill, I think that Vitex is worth looking into. It's a good idea to try to get the body to start up on its own, but if it can't, then Vitex is something that might be worth looking into. Maca, sometimes used in the first half of the cycle, Vitex in the second half of the cycle can be helpful if you like cycle them, or some women just need to use Vitex all cycle long. Sometimes that's enough, sometimes it's not, and at that point you need to look into, depending on how long you were on the birth control pill, what nutrients were depleted. A lot of times it's vitamin E, which is huge for fertility, vitamin C, huge for fertility. We've got minerals like zinc and selenium, huge for fertility, and they get very depleted by the pill. And then we got B vitamins, super important for fertility, and of course, very depleted by the pill. So I start to look into nutrient deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, if the cycle's not starting up again. You can really start to dig in. And it can sometimes take a little bit of trial and error to figure out what's going on, but a lot of times Vitex does help women post-pill. For gut issues, eating easy to digest foods, roots and fruits, improving, but I have a poop question. Mine is fluffy. What can cause this? Sometimes it happens, like it almost feels like it's just not formed, and that's okay. A lot of us are used to what I call like fiber poops, which are just like bulky, massive craps, and that's not always like what's necessarily healthy, because that means there's a lot of stuff feeding bacteria on the tail end. Fiber is anything that your body will not digest. Only the bacteria digest that. So I don't think there's a problem, but if it has like jagged edges, I know this is getting like TMI, that could mean that the gut tissue is actually a little bit inflamed, but a lot of times it's not that it's even more inflamed than it was before. It's just that the fiber was kind of like bulking up the stools and really irritating the gut lining. So the goal would just be to get it to improve over time. I don't really think it's like a problem. You want it to be well formed, easy to pass, normal eventually, but sometimes changing things and taking out fiber can really change the constitution of your poop, and it is what it is. But sometimes like adding in certain fibers once in a while to sweep things can be helpful. So like organic psyllium husk once in a while, again, you don't want to get reliant on those. You want them to kind of be like a nice clean sweep. What else do I like? Triphala is another one, Triphala. It's a traditional Ayurvedic blend of fibers, and it's really, really gentle on the gut. Hydrolyzed guar gum can sometimes be good. And then like a once in a while clean sweep, you can use like oat bran. But it's as long as you feel regular and you feel cleaned out, there's no need to really like utilize a fiber. But sometimes it can be helpful if you feel like, wow, things are just really like weird. Wondering if my friend believes after weeks of diarrhea, nothing came in her stool test, so they are assuming IBS. I want to help her. Would oregano help, or any suggestions? It's really hard to say. Like, anything would be speculation at this point. Obviously, like the basic stool test that conventional doctors run is very minimal. They're just looking for like massive, scary parasites. They're not looking for like specific strains of bacteria being imbalanced. I think that a good spore-based probiotic is really good idea. I really like Just Thrive probiotics, or a mega spore biotic. It's just you can't get a mega spore biotic without a practitioner. And then Just Thrive's prebiotic is really, really helpful. It can really wreck things at first and make it almost feel worse, but a lot of times it can really shift the microbiome. And then maybe some herbs like oregano or something like that would help, but if you don't know what you're dealing with, you don't necessarily want to just like throw random herbs at the problem. It might kill some stuff, but then it's just going to grow back once you stop the herbs. So your goal is to really shift the microbial balance and feed, your good bacteria, the native bacteria, and those bacteria will usually take care of the whatever's going on in there. But sometimes it's like stress. Did she go through a period of stress? Is it a gallbladder issue, a liver issue? There's so many things it could be. And so sometimes like it does have to do with the gut, but it's so much more than that. And a lot of times people think like things happen suddenly, like, oh my gosh, something just happened suddenly and I just started struggling with diarrhea for 2 weeks, but they've had like gas, bloating, gallbladder pain, heartburn for literally like 7 years, and they think that this just like showed up out of the blue. And I'm like, no, it didn't. You probably had digestive problems for a long time, and it's just getting worse and worse over time. What are some suggestions of binders for gut protocols? A basic one would be like activated charcoal. I don't love using that because it's so constipating. However, some people can't afford like the more, I guess, like premier binders, and that's totally fine. So I usually put it in there as like a convenience. I don't want you like breaking the bank over a binder, but my favorite is going to be the Quicksilver binder. You can get it on Amazon, and it has a mixture of fibers and activated charcoal, so it keeps the bowels moving and it doesn't constipate you. And then I also like Pectosol C. Pectosol C and Quicksilver binder are actually like two separate things. Pectosol C binds to a lot of heavy metals, binds to a lot of toxins, but activated charcoal and the Quicksilver binder binds to everything. So it really depends on what I'm doing with the person. If I'm doing like a heavy metal, if we have heavy metal issues and gut issues, a lot of times we're going to be using Pectosol C. But if we are just dealing with the gut at first, we're using Quicksilver. So it just kind of depends. Sometimes we're using both. If somebody's really toxic, I'll be honest, we're just like throwing them all in there because I really want to make sure binders are what keep us from feeling like absolute trash while we're detoxing or while we're killing bacteria or that type of thing. I think you've answered this before, but I'm taking notes today. I love that you guys take notes. What progesterone oil did you buy off Amazon? Can someone with gut issues take progesterone oil orally, or should it be applied topically? I didn't buy it off of Amazon. I buy it from someone named Ona. Ona's progesterone, ONA''S. You have to get it directly from her website, and she makes a progesterone oil and vitamin E. I think like I rub it into my gums. This was kind of a question that I had because progesterone can kind of mess with the gallbladder a little bit, and if you're taking an oral capsule, it's needing to be processed by the liver and then it goes into the bile. And so I was kind of thinking like maybe if I could rub an oil into my gums, it would feel better for my digestion. And I haven't really noticed that much of a difference, honestly. I just was like, I'm going to just switch it up to just try it. But I usually get one prescribed by my doctor, but you don't have to get progesterone prescribed. So that's the one that I buy from her website directly, Ona. And then you can apply progesterone topically as well. Keep in mind that the skin absorbs things a little differently because it is a barrier, so it's going to absorb it slowly. It might accumulate progesterone over time, especially if you're putting it on a very fatty area of your body. It can accumulate in the fat cells, so it's just a little different than taking it orally. And keep in mind that under the tongue and the gums are going to be directly into the bloodstream. Is it okay to eat only cooked fruit? Trying to incorporate more fruit, but really struggle with oral allergies, histamine issues with raw fruit. Yeah, that's actually amazing that you're doing that and you figured out that cooking your fruit is helping. I think cooked fruit is honestly the best form of fruit because it's very difficult to get ripe fruit in our day and age. We're not like going to the tree and picking it directly off the tree, and so a lot of times fruit is very, it's picked when it's unripe. And a lot of people that are very sensitive to like histamines and they have allergies don't tend to do ripe fruit very well because of how it's picked and ripened and that type of stuff. So cooked fruit all the way. I've just been diagnosed with hypothyroidism. I apologize, girl. I know it sucks, but lots of people have hypothyroidism, and keep in mind it has a lot to do with blood sugar imbalances, not getting enough fuel, progesterone issues, estrogen's really hard on the thyroid, and so is heavy metals. I've just been diagnosed with hypothyroidism. My TSH level is at a 7. They would like to prescribe me Synthroid to relieve my symptoms of hair loss and weight gain, but my friend is on Nature's Thyroid. Any suggestions? Synthroid tends to not work very well for a lot of people, but at the same time, sometimes it works great. So it just depends. But a lot of people do better on like on Nature Throid or something like that. What's with the bad reputation of dairy? Mucus and cancer causing, bad for digestion, inflammatory, blah, blah, blah. You guys know that I'm just like so annoyed with it. I just don't like, I seriously think there's like something to it. I think like I'm going to be a little crazy here, and I think there's some type of like conspiracy because I have looked at so many studies and okay, we need to take a step back, and I'm not going to say that there's no studies saying that, whatever, dairy spikes insulin. Of course, there are studies that saying dairy spikes insulin, but so does eating a piece of beef. So does eating a piece of tofu. Like, okay, we're going to say like, okay, can't eat dairy because it spikes your insulin. And I'm like, well, so does that steak over there, or so does that piece of tofu you're eating. So that is null and void to me. It is a more insulin producing food, food, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's bad. It just matters what you combine it with. There's a lot of people that say there's like estrogen in milk, and I'm like, well, yeah, there's like microscopic amounts of estrogen, but let's compare that to whatever else you're eating. There's like I want to say like thousands and thousands of times more estrogen in things like grains and beans, and no one's saying like, oh my god, there's estrogen in beans, stop eating that. I mean, I'm saying that, but like most people are still like eating beans and grains and things like that. So it's just like the arguments against dairy are just ridiculous to me. Also, so many times we blame the food, even this is a problem in functional medicine as well, they blame the food for something the body is doing. And I don't mean that the body is like, we blame the body. It just means like it's like there's a fire burning and we're trying to like remove the thing that is burning rather than put the fire out. Like it makes no sense to me. It's like the house is on fire and let's try to move the house. And I'm like, why don't we just put the fire out and we can like regenerate the house and we could rebuild the house? Like, I don't understand. So it's very similar. Like people that don't do good on dairy when they have bacterial overgrowth in the gut, which is a lot of people. People don't do good with dairy when they have hypothyroidism, which is a lot of people. People don't do good when they have serious HPA axis dysfunction or adrenal fatigue, whatever you want to call it. They can't do dairy very well. And people that have low progesterone can't do dairy very well. And so that makes like a lot of people. But instead of dealing with those issues head on, so many people are removing dairy. And a lot of times this makes hypothyroidism worse. It makes progesterone worse. It makes your adrenal issues worse because casein protein is so anti-stress and anti-cortisol. And it also forces you to replace dairy protein with things that are pretty inflammatory, like nuts and seeds and excess green vegetables. And then on top of it, we're adding in more protein from like meat products. These are very rich in iron, which feed more bacteria, and so therefore we're making bacteria problems worse. Keep in mind that dairy has something called lactoferrin in it that binds to iron, which keeps pathogens from eating iron. So I would say that the bottom line is the bad reputation of dairy just comes from people's stupidity. I think that's what it is. They just can't look beyond what everyone is telling them. And I think it's also this regurgitation. Like people hear it through the grapevine, and vegan and paleo are both really anti-dairy. And so it's like everyone and their mom is either like vegan or paleo or somewhere in between. And so it's like, hey, you know, dairy's inflammatory. And I'm like, and then somebody's like, yeah, dairy's really inflammatory. And then it's like, dairy's really bad for your gut. And it just like becomes this telephone. And then you like, don't even know who said it first or why someone said it. It just has been like spread like a cancer throughout society. So I'm not against dairy, you guys know that, but it totally depends on the type of dairy, like how the cow is treated, all that good stuff. So do you literally never experience standard period symptoms since your hormones are so balanced? Blows my mind you can have a period without feeling like total shit. I know, it's crazy. And I used to, like, seriously guys, I got put on birth control because I had 3-month-long periods. That, like, you guys are always like, oh, you know, you're so amazing. And like, this stems from me having the worst hormone problems on the planet Earth. I was like bipolar before my period. I wanted to destroy everybody, clotty, crampy, and I would bleed for like months on end. And my mom was this wasn't more in like late on in high school, and I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I'm just like bleeding like for months. And she was like, oh my gosh, like I'm afraid you're anemic. And so we went to the doctor, and of course the doctor was like, here, take some. She tested my progesterone levels. That's actually crazy to me. And she said I was low progesterone. I still remember being, I think it was 17. No, I was 16. And she was like, your progesterone levels are low. Let me put you on this progesterone pill. Well, now I know that she wasn't putting me on progesterone. She was putting me on progestin. She was putting me on a birth control pill, a low-dose progesterone pill. And during that time, while I was on it, of course my periods regulated because of my cycle was shut down. And then when I went off, it was like shit hit the fan. And I had worse periods than I ever had before. Like I literally had the worst migraines. My hair was falling out. Like obviously was diagnosed with PCOS. I had 3 autoimmune diseases. I was bedridden at one point. I could not get out of bed and had to sleep for like 8 hours a day and then 8 hours in the night. So I was like awake for like a small portion of the day. And so I don't really have a lot of symptoms. There are times when I'm not taking as good of care of my body. And I'm like, why am I so grouchy? Like, I think I want to rip everyone's head off. But then I'm like, oh yeah, I think my period's coming tomorrow. But most of the time my period hits me and I'm like, oh yeah, it's been 28 days. So I don't really have very many symptoms these days, but I am human. And so there are going to be times when I'm maybe too stressed, I'm not taking care of myself. I try to implement detox strategies as much as possible pre-period. So like castor oil packs, coffee enemas, I'll try to up those, chlorophyll lemonades, just my regular like little detox strategies. I always make sure I get 8 hours of sleep every single night. I'm not like obsessive about health as much as I used to be. I make sure I get in the gym pretty much every day, sweat for an hour, hop in the sauna maybe 10 minutes after. But like I said, I'm not as obsessed with health as I used to be. It used to be like my full-time job, and now I'm just kind of, I don't want to say I'm over it, but it's more just like it's kind of ingrained into my very being. There are times, like periods of time, where I eat better than certain other periods of time, but I have a pretty good foundation of eating pretty healthfully most of the time. I don't have a lot of cravings, but like even like I'm not the type of person to stay away from anything that I want. Like right now I'm on a Dr. Pepper kick, and I like have like maybe 1 or 2 Dr. Peppers a week if I want them, and then I'm over it and I'm done. But most of the time I am eating high quality, nutrient dense foods, and eating 1 or 2 things that are maybe not so good for me is not going to change the fact that I'm still nourishing my body and listening to my body. But yeah, I don't really have very symptomatic periods any longer. That was a long way of saying like, no, I don't. And it's amazing. But when I do, like if I have, sometimes my first day will be a little crampy, or I'll just kind of be like a little more tired than normal, or I'll be like very socially, like do not talk to me, introverted. And at that point, usually taking an aspirin or 2 fixes me right up. Does grain-fed dairy meat contain gluten? I had organic butter first. That killed my stomach, but totally fine with grass-fed, even if not organic. Yeah, so I wouldn't say it has gluten in it, but a lot of times people find that they cannot digest it well because they're being, those cows are being fed corn and soy most of the time, and God knows what else, honestly. There have been cow farms that have like been shown to like feed their cows like expired Skittles. So I don't know if it contains gluten, but I know that the fatty acid profile in it is very, very different. It's very high in PUFAs, polyunsaturated fats, and poor quality fatty acids, whereas when a cow's eating grass, their butter and their byproducts are more saturated, and we know how bad PUFAs are for us, right? And so keep in mind that what the animal eats is going to completely determine how high in PUFAs that food is. Is it a good idea to drink the cranberry chlorophyll drink daily? I have been, as well as dandelion tea. Yeah, it's fine. If you're doing it with milk thistle, I would maybe take a break from milk thistle, like maybe do the first 2 weeks of your cycle without milk thistle and the second half of your cycle with milk thistle. It's just, you don't want it to lose its potency, and it can kind of like, it can sometimes mess with people long term. So if you're going to do the milk thistle daily, I would just like omit the milk thistle for like 2 weeks out of the month, and then go 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. But overall, chlorophyll drink daily, awesome. I do mine almost daily. I'll mix up the juices sometimes. Like I'll do cranberry, and then I'll get sick of cranberry, so I'll do like pomegranate. Sometimes I'll do like tart cherry, like ooh, super bouge. Whatever red drink I can get. Sometimes I'll do, like one time I found blueberry juice, and I was like, what is this? And it was actually pretty good, but I prefer like the more tart stuff. So yeah, I think it's fine to do daily. I've been taking 1,000 milligrams of B3 twice a day. What do you think of this? Sometimes it can give you headaches. So if you're getting headaches, that could be why. But overall, usually fine. I take about 650 milligrams once or twice a day, depending on how I feel. But yeah, niacinamide is very, well, depending on what form you're taking. If you're taking niacinamide, it's usually pretty powerful. And it just really depends on the person. Some people react really well to it, and then some people like not so much. It helps with oily scalps, though. If you struggle with oily scalp, it can really help with that. How does vitamin E help with fat loss or fat redistribution? Sorry, girl, I saw your email and I haven't replied to it yet. But keep in mind that free fatty acids are going to be what's the #1 cause of insulin resistance or fat gain. Free fatty acids are being burned all the time because we store free fatty acids in our cells, in our fat cells, or we're eating them, whatever. I know that you're eating mostly saturated fat, so your polyunsaturated free fatty acids are not probably coming into your mouth. They're more likely coming from your cells. As you redistribute fat, as you burn through fat, as your cortisol levels go down, your fat cells are being opened slowly, right? That's the benefit of increasing your metabolic function. However, what you're pulling from those fat cells is a lot of times things that your body was saving to burn for last. Your body utilizes as many saturated fatty acids as possible and store the polyunsaturated fats. And so as we pull that, they're pretty harsh on the liver, they can be harsh on the cells, they can be pretty inflammatory. And even though you're feeling your body really well and your body's pulling them slowly, it can sometimes cause a little bit of insulin resistance during that process. And so it's just best to be to take vitamin E to be more protective of your cells. It helps block estrogens that are coming out of the fat cells, and it also helps block those free fatty acids. So anywhere from like 400 IUs to 800 IUs a day can be really, really helpful if you're on this like metabolic healing journey and you're really like shifting you seem like your fat is redistributing over your body, but you're not burning it quite yet. You're like, what's gotta give? A lot of times it could be some insulin resistance being driven by, if it's not being driven by the gut, then it's going to be driven by free fatty acids being burned. So vitamin E is just a preventative and a protective mechanism for that. It also helps with the production of hormones. It's very protective against oxidative stress. Like, to me, I think it's a supplement that should be taken by most people just because it's so protective and it's anti-aging. But it also helps with fat redistribution in some women. First cycle with absolutely zero mid-cycle spotting, woohoo! And breast tenderness. You guys, seriously, sometimes mid-cycle spotting is one of the hardest symptoms to get rid of. Although I still had cramps, I feel like that's a win. The weight loss has stopped though, and I'm starting to gain again. Okay, well, it's one of those things where it's very important, you guys, to not obsess about the scale. I know it's hard because weight is like, oh my gosh, it's such a big thing. But I really recommend taking pictures. I really recommend taking measurements. And I also recommend just with those pictures, paying attention to how your fat is distributed. And weight loss and weight gain happens all the time, but sometimes when we're on like a health journey, we sometimes start to obsess about like weight loss and weight gain, and it's just important to like kind of have a detachment from your weight a little bit. You're gonna go through seasons of life where there's gain and loss. Like right now, you guys, I weigh, I feel more comfortable sitting around like 135, 136, but right now I'm like at 145, 147 because I went through a stressful period of time with Fully Nourished. I wasn't nourishing my body as well. I was previously on a more lower carb diet, like about a year and a half ago. And so really my metabolism and my body has had like quite the toll taken on it the past year and a half. And so I'm just giving it space to do its thing. Yeah, I'm a little chunkier than I would be happy with. I'm in my fat genes, but it just doesn't really matter that much to me anymore because I'm able to really view my body with a little bit of detachment. I understand that my body is really reacting to its environment, reacting to how I treat it. And what else do I expect, Like, do I expect me to just implement all these healthy habits and it to look a certain way overnight? It's not how it happens. Now, of course, we want to take certain symptoms as a sign, whether that's good or bad. Like maybe we need to tweak some stuff, maybe we don't. But it is important to also say like, wow, I had no mid-cycle spotting. There are improvements happening, but if it's not the improvements that you're expecting or you're wanting to see, then you get disappointed. So again, I know you're working on your macros. You want to make sure you're getting enough protein. You want to make sure you're not going overboard on the carbs. This also applies to each individual meal. You don't want to it's not just your overall day of macros. It's also, are you consuming 80 grams of carbs in a meal? That's not a good idea. So just make sure your macros are balanced, but you're also balancing your meals in general. Sometimes, messing with the size of your meals can matter. Sometimes people need 4 bigger meals than eating every 2 or 3 hours. Play around with it, but as long as you're seeing improvements in your overall symptoms, that's something to totally be celebrating and be a huge win. If you don't do strength training or you don't do any type of sweating or detoxification, enhancement, that would probably be a good idea. And then evaluate how you're sleeping, EMFs. Keep in mind that Wi-Fi is a huge deal, guys, especially in weight gain. If we feel like we have really slow metabolisms, are you sleeping next to a Wi-Fi router? Are you sleeping next to your cell phone that's not on airplane mode? So observe those things. And then are you wearing your blue blocking glasses before you go to bed? And then what hours are you sleeping between? A lot of people are saying like, yeah, I'm sleeping 8 hours, but they're sleeping from like midnight to 8 a.m. And I'm like, no, get to bed at 9:30 and 10 or 10 and see how you do. So there are some things that can be tweaked, but if you're just like doing a little bit of bouncing around, that's okay. Don't stress about it. But I know that you're working really hard to tweak things and figure out what's going on with your body. So at that point, just really focus on the things that are improving and don't stress too much about the weight. Weight is very relative to how safe the body's feeling, and sometimes it will fluctuate when you're making big changes. A couple months ago, I switched to all natural shampoo and my scalp is greasy. Is this normal or is this hormone related? Anything I can do? Yeah, you could do like apple cider vinegar rinses are kind of helpful, and then like bentonite clay masks. Morocco Method makes this scalp cleanse called Zen Detox, which I actually really, really like. It's like a mix of zeolite clay and like some other clays. It's not so drying as bentonite clay, but bentonite clay does the trick. But yeah, it can sometimes be like just natural shampoo doesn't strip the scalp like conventional shampoo does, and so it can feel a little bit different, and sometimes your scalp does go through like a very long detox period, like 3 to 6 months sometimes. So just like keep it up and pay attention to it. But it could also be a pH imbalance, just depending on like what shampoo you're using. Maybe it's not working that well for you. When will FN students be able to have a meeting with you? I think you may mention an HTMA deal. Yeah, so that's gonna actually like roll out in about 2 weeks. So it's like being rolled out slowly. I'm doing a lot of shifting on the back end. I know you guys like don't see what's always going on, but there's a lot of legal stuff going on right now. And like I've just been like overwhelmed and stressed with just like growing pains of my business. So I'm like rolling out new packages, rolling out new tests, and then for fully nourished students, there's going to be discounted sessions with me and discounted packages with me. So it's all coming. Just hang tight. It'll be like the next month. Is liquid vitamin E meant to be taken under the tongue or swallowed as a liquid? I think it could be both, but I would probably take it under the tongue, or at least like any type of liquid supplement, I'll usually let sit under my tongue for like 20 seconds and then I'll swallow it. I was lactose intolerant for the longest time. I can't thank you enough. I can eat cheese or half and half and I don't get bloating at all, which is unheard of. I feel so much better. No weight loss, but how I feel is a win. Thank you. I'm so excited, Katya. I think sometimes it can take, the weight loss is the thing that's going to change, sometimes the last thing to change, just because the body has been under stress for so long. It's kind of like, what do we expect, you know? So I always recommend that my clients focus on the symptoms that are changing, the shifts in feeling good. I always say, like, would you rather be a size 2 and feel awful, or would you rather be a healthy size, whatever you are, 6, 8, and feel amazing? You know, like really sit down and say, what do I prefer? And a lot of us are like, I would like to be the size 2 and feel amazing. And I'm like, many of the women that you're looking at that are size 2s or like super lean are not feeling amazing. So let's just, give the body some space. We definitely want to be at a healthy weight, but there is a happy in between, and sometimes it can take a while to achieve a balanced, stable weight, and hang in there in the meantime. What do you think of wild yam? My naturopath made me this bomb adaptogen tincture with ashwagandha, skullcap, licorice, but it also has wild yam. Yeah, I think wild yam is fine. A lot of progesterone is derived from wild yam, so I don't have a problem with wild yam at all. I think it's pretty helpful. The one thing with licorice, though, is just make sure you don't have high cortisol and you have low cortisol, because licorice raises your cortisol levels. I have PCOS, insulin resistance type. What are things I can do to get my body back on track and start losing weight again? Biggest things, sleep. So try to go to bed at 9:30 or 10, no later. Don't be on screens, about an hour or two before you go to bed. Journal, meditate, deep breathe, anything but be on screens before bed. That's going to be the biggest thing, sleep. And then getting sunlight in your eyes first thing when you wake up is also important. Strength training is awesome. Eating balanced meals every 2 to 4 hours. Some women need to really balance their blood sugar and eat like every 2 to 3. Some women need to eat like every 3 to 4. It just kind of depends. Obviously follow your hunger signals and just pay attention to what your body needs. Eating protein, carb, and fat is very, very helpful. And not eating gluten is also very helpful. However, I always like to say, like, it's not about the gluten. It's more about, like, what the gluten-rich foods are doing to the digestive tract. It's really affecting your ability to digest proteins. And so going on a gluten-free diet or a naturally gluten-free diet, meaning that you're not, like, eating a bunch of gluten-free foods, but you're actually eating whole, real foods that just don't have gluten in them naturally, is really very, very good. But yeah, overall, exercise, sun, sleep, and nutrient dense balanced nutrition is going to be the biggest things. And then supplements are kind of a cherry on top. And for insulin resistance, I really like myo-inositol, berberine, biotin or vitamin B7, and niacinamide, vitamin B3. I also like caffeine, so having a cup of coffee mid-morning that has a little bit of cream and some coconut sugar is actually quite helpful for insulin resistance. Jess, I've been craving nuts, hummus, bread, weird-ass things. What could this mean if I crave beans and legumes? Like I would die for a peanut butter toast or chili right now. WTF, haha. Is it because I've cut it out with FN? It could be, and at that point, eat it. Like, just find the highest quality one you can and eat some. I don't think a little bit of hummus here and there is going to be a problem. I don't think having a little peanut butter here and there is going to be a problem. I'm not, anti-nut. I'm more like anti-relying upon nuts as like a staple food. I don't think having like some peanut butter toast every, couple days is going to be a problem, especially if you crave it. I don't like seeds. I really don't. So nuts and seeds are very different, and if I was going to pick one or the other, nuts would be the one I choose. The reason why is because they are rich in something called L-arginine, and L-arginine is actually pretty metabolically supportive. So that's what I would opt for, like nuts. And then like legumes are, I would like minimize them, but I wouldn't be afraid of them. So have some hummus. If it's even sprouted, that's even better. Maybe make your own, put all these like yummy spices, your own fat, so you can like make it really good. Sometimes I'll take like garbanzo beans and put like a big hunkin' scoop of ghee, and so like that kind of balances out the fats, and then I'll just spice it on up. And then I'll eat it with a carrot, and so that'll kind of bind to the endotoxins being created. I don't do that very often, but if I want something, I do not deny my body, because I just trust that it has some type of wisdom that I do not understand, and I'm not going to deny it. But it's just kind of like one of those things where give it what it needs, don't obsess, but also just do it in the most body-honoring way you possibly can, but then don't stress about it. And you're like, if you're mentally, I was going to say too, if like you mentally are like keeping those things in a restricted zone in your mind, then you might be craving them because it's like, I can't have them, I'm not allowed. For me, I'm like, I can totally have legumes, but it's probably going to wreck my stomach. I'm going to feel so bloated. So I just kind of like keep that in my mind. When I eat them, I don't feel that good. But if you eat them and you feel fine and you feel great, I don't think it's going to be a problem to have them here and there. Thank you for your response via IBS. What does taking vitamin E benefit again? It blocks from polyunsaturated fats, free fatty acids that are going to damage the body in general and just really slow the metabolism, and it also helps block estrogen. Thank you so much. After ditching keto and trying to balance out my gut, I'm getting some improvement after 8 months of probiotic and easy to digest foods. Thanks for your help. Woohoo! I know, Gina, for you, it's been such a process, and I feel so bad that you have been going through that, but keep it up. I know progress is slow and frustrating, but you're doing it. Non-toxic cookware or makeup first? I've got the organic food down, and I have the aqua filter you recommended. Awesome. I think it kind of depends. For me, I did the makeup first because I am a vain bitch. No, I'm just kidding. But I just wear makeup every single day, and so I wanted some non-toxic makeup. Not a big deal. But there are still certain things that I don't really stress about. Like, for example, like eyebrows. I was in Arizona last weekend and I ran out of my eyebrow pencil, and I just bought one from e.l.f. and I didn't like stress about it. I'm still using it. I'm going to finish it. So it really just depends. I just prioritize like face makeup and skincare just because it's sitting on my skin all day. But then like non-toxic cookware, you can buy like 1 or 2 key pieces. You don't have to like buy a whole set. I think sometimes we like buy a whole set and it's like, oh my god, it's gonna be like $500. But I've slowly been collecting. Like I have a Le Creuset pot like from 2 years ago, and then I just bought an Extrema, another Extrema like a couple of weeks ago. So I'm like slowly getting things, and I had like a stainless steel set that I still use a little bit. I know it's not the best, but it's like, I'm not gonna break the bank. When I can afford to buy another one, I'll buy another one. But I think that like stressing and putting any type of stress on your finances because of health can be really, really like not good for your health. So it's just better to like slowly introduce things that you find important and that you find that you're using daily. And I know that you know what that is more than I do. High uric acid on blood tests. Why might that be? Sorry, I missed the last 2 lives, so I'm on fire. It's fine. I like that you're on fire. Usually a high uric acid is going to be due to like not being able to digest protein very well, maybe low hydrochloric acid, but everything that I'm going to say right now is like going to be speculation at this point because I really don't know what would be happening. I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, it could be like a detoxification issue. So yeah, I'm not really sure, but those are the 3 things that come to mind. How much collagen should we get a day? I use like 3 scoops of the Great Lakes brand. Yeah, I usually like aim for like upwards of like, sometimes I'll do like 25 to 50 grams, which I believe it's like, I would say that's like, I think 20 grams in 2 tablespoons. So I don't think that's a problem. Some people do get like headaches or breakouts from collagen, and in that case they need to use gelatin. But for the most part, if you feel fine with a lot of collagen, I don't see a problem. In your hair loss story, you mentioned an aspirin and caffeine spray for the scalp. What aspirin is okay to use, and what do you mean by caffeine? I mean caffeine powder. So I actually buy like a caffeine supplement from Bulk Supplements off of Amazon, and they have like little capsules, and I open up the capsules and utilize the powder. And then for the aspirin, I use just Jerry Care, and I just pour hot water over the aspirin, let it dissolve, and then we'll mix in the caffeine. Sometimes caffeine doesn't mix well, and so you need to add like a little bit of alcohol. It's chemistry for you, and it will dissolve. Thoughts on zinc glycinate, zinc methionate, and zinc histidinate with hydrochloric acid? Does it really help with digestion? It can. It just really depends on your specific zinc levels. So the reason why zinc works so well for some people and not for others is because some people are deficient in zinc and depleted in zinc, and they need zinc. And some people are not, or they have really slow metabolisms, and so zinc's going to make it worse. And so they don't see things improve, and sometimes even see things get worse. So it just kind of depends on the person. I don't like supplement willy-nilly with zinc. I know a lot of like zinc gut healing supplements will have zinc in them, but I kind of don't do it unless I know that the person needs it. Continue to have issues staying full. Tonight for dinner, I had some sweet potato, raw carrot salad, organic chicken wings, and coconut oil. I feel like that's balanced and a good amount of food. But now 1.5 hours later, and I'm so hungry. Well, the funny thing is, like, I saw your temp and pulse post. I don't know if you saw me reply to it, but I did mention an imbalanced blood sugar. It sounds like you still have, if your temps are going up and down and up and down, you sound like you have imbalanced blood sugar. Like your blood sugar is just like up and down and up and down, which sounds like a stress issue, which is why I'm surprised your naturopath gave you licorice. So has she ever tested your cortisol and your adrenaline levels? Because that is something that I would really probably want to test. And how's your pulses? Are your pulses fast or are they slow? So many questions, sorry. But I would say that because you have such imbalanced blood sugar, you might need to plan a little better. So for my clients that have this problem, and it happens, it sometimes can take like 6 weeks to remedy, I have you make a smoothie that's this big, that has frozen fruit, casein protein, collagen protein, and is half milk and half OJ or whatever juice you like as the base. And you fill this baby up and you sip on it between meals to keep your blood sugar balanced. And it can be a little excessive. You can feel like, wow, I am really just chugging down this smoothie all day long, and you're really just kind of sipping between meals to keep your blood sugar stable. It can take 4 to 6 weeks to see balance occur, but a lot of times it's what's necessary. If you don't see improvement in temps, you don't see an improvement in your hunger levels, you can never stay satisfied, a lot of times it's just a sign that like, wow. Or another thing is, you might not just be eating enough at a meal. You might do better with bigger, more fulfilling, satisfying meals, like 4 times a day rather than smaller meals, every 3 hours or so. So experiment with 2 things. First, try bigger, more satisfying meals, meaning that they're, bigger than what you're normally eating, not so snack sized, but like 3 substantial meals and maybe 2 snacks in between those substantial meals. If that doesn't help with the satisfaction, then try my smoothie idea and see if that helps, like sipping on something all day long. What do you think about immune suppressants? I'm on an injection once every 3 months called Xolair for my chronic urticaria. I'll be honest, I've never heard of that, but I have quite the autoimmune history, so I'm very familiar with immunosuppressants. Remember, guys, I have lupus and Hashimoto's and then celiac disease. But I also have, on my boyfriend's side, there's a lot of lupus in the family, which is really interesting. It's just a coincidence. And so immunosuppressants are immunosuppressants. They suppress the immune system. They are pretty dangerous. This is not to scare you. It's more just to say, like, if you need them, you need them, but also understanding that they can be a problem. They can suppress the metabolism. They're suppressing the immune system. And so that can really open us up to a lot of issues. It's important to just read the pamphlet and be informed. But autoimmunity is a pretty complicated condition, but a lot of times it has to do with free fatty acids, it has to do with estrogen, and it has to do with really bad gut bacteria imbalance. But it sounds like you're on like an injection every 3 months. It sounds like it's something that you have under control. So at that point, it's really about what you need, and they do have side effects though, and sometimes they have the side effects that, like, I find that some clients are struggling with all these symptoms, all these issues, and it's because of the medication. But sometimes it's not. So it just kind of depends. I've seen problems with them, and then I've seen them be completely fine. How does one balance hormones after antidepressants if you also have PCOS? Keep in mind that after antidepressants, a lot of times we have like serotonin, like a lot of serotonin going on. We had this serotonin reuptake inhibitor for quite some time. Some SSRIs are also norepinephrine inhibitors, so understanding which SSRI you're on. I also really like a book called A Mind of Your Own by Dr. Kelly Brogan. It's pretty enlightening when it comes to antidepressants. But really, like, after antidepressants, it's more just about, again, increasing your function overall. Eating nutrient-dense foods, taking care of your body, exercising is so important to get that stuff out, sweat that stuff out. Checking your thyroid is also important. Antidepressants tend to suppress thyroid function and slow down the metabolism. Usually reverse T3 is pretty elevated when someone's taking antidepressants. Just an observation I've made, which shows that cortisol is converting free T3 into reverse T3. So checking the thyroid post antidepressants is actually important. And then checking progesterone levels. And then overall just taking care of yourself. So like I said, sunlight, sleep, exercise, and nutrient-dense foods. Those are kind of my basic recommendations. And then sometimes people do need supplemental support, but it's always good to lay that foundation first. I have the Jerrycure aspirin brand. It's 325 milligrams per pill, too much for a daily dose. I personally take 325 milligrams per day, as long as I pair it with K2. So it's important that you understand that when you take aspirin, it does deplete you of vitamin K and glycine. So you don't want to take it without making sure you're getting glycine-rich foods, which would be like collagen, gelatin, bone broth, and then actually vitamin K. I submitted a question earlier, but I have another one. Recently after I eat, I've been getting exhausted and dizzy to the point I have to lay down for a half an hour afterwards. Well, what are you eating? That's the biggest thing. Like, what's the balance? Are you eating a lot of protein or a lot of carbohydrate? And what has changed? It's hard for me to know what's going on, but that's really interesting. Is there something going on in the gut? Like, is other digestion disrupted? Those would be questions that I'd ask, but that's really interesting. Thoughts on exfoliating the face and skin? Blackheads. I think like blackheads are usually like a deeper root imbalance, but I don't think exfoliation is a big deal as long as you're not overdoing it. I've heard pure essential oils like clary sage can be beneficial for women. What are your thoughts on that? I use thieves, lavender, peace, and calm daily. Some essential oils are super estrogenic. So for example, lavender is pretty estrogenic and can actually cause like weight gain if used too much too often, or estrogen dominance like symptoms. So I'm very careful with essential oils. I recommend being very, very conservative and just being aware that a lot of them are estrogenic just because plants are so very potent. But yeah, I think they can be really helpful, like lower stress. They can be like pleasant to smell. They can really just overall make our environment really a nice place to be. So I think they're great. Also, what's the science behind weight loss being so much stinking harder postpartum? Eating to nourish myself and match breastfeeding cows, but I used to lose weight so much easier before baby. Okay, Instagram's cutting me off, so I'm gonna end this really quick so I can save it, and then I'm gonna go live again, so just join me in a second. Sorry for cutting you off really quick.